The first PS5 exclusive game has now been released. It's Returnal, created by the Finnish developer studio Housemarque, a sci-fi time loop tale set in a dark and really intriguing, beautiful universe. I've talked to Housemarque about the game, about the challenges creating it, and also about the challenges in creating the first exclusive PS5 game.
Over and over, I relive my first moments on this alien planet. The crash. The attack. My death.
With me now is marketing director Mikael Haveri and senior lead designer Eevi Korhonen from Housemarque, here to talk to me about Returnal, which has just been released. But before we get into Returnal, I would like to take a few steps back, because at Housemarque you've created some great arcade shooters such as Dead Nation and Alien Nation, and from those games to Returnal there's a huge step. So when did you decide that you were ready to take this leap into a much bigger and more ambitious title as Returnal is?
Some of the team members decided already 15 years ago that they wanted to do bigger titles, but that game didn't get picked up by a publisher. So we made arcade games for 13 years. And then, well, we've been pitching now, even in the last few years, bigger titles, but since, like you mentioned, our previous portfolio has been slightly skewed to smaller indie type titles, then it has been a big step. So we've been now preparing, getting our things in order, and getting great people on board like Eevi, for example, because narrative, all these different additional layers, it requires quite a bit of additional work.
And how did the idea for Returnal develop, and also what came first? Because the game itself has so many aspects to it, where the time loop concept being the biggest one of them.
I think that this has always been an idea of what our game director Harry Kruger's vision for a dark planet type of a game could be. And I think everything starts at the beginning because it's a sum of the parts. I think Eevi has a very good grasp on how these things interlay into each other.
Yep. So when I joined in 2018, like the vision and the kind of like core of the story was already there, and it's actually changed very little from it. So Harry's original vision is pretty much all there, and I kind of like joined in and I fleshed out like the planet and the alien civilization and kind of like how we're telling that story. But it was really, really fascinating when I was sitting in the interviews and I was hearing about the concept, and I was like super, super stoked for it. It was something different and something dark and something weird. And those are the things that I really love.
You mentioned that you created the alien races in the game. What was your inspiration for them?
I dug into a lot of different resources. So we're very much inspired by Greek mythology. If you kind of look behind all of the names that you see, like Selene, Helios, Atropos, and a lot of the stuff in the game, it has a lot of its roots in Greek myth. So we were kind of like also very inspired by that. But of course, like other really great like sci-fi titles, movies, and kind of like time loop stories, we were like very much in the beginning like looking into like how to do a time loop story, because that was the core structure of the game. So that should also be the core structure of the story. So yeah, I just did a lot of Wikipedia, a lot of watching movies, a lot of reading books. And there I just kind of like picked apart kind of like what makes our alien civilization special. And I was really, really kind of like excited to develop how the story is told from their perspective. And you see it with these kind of xenoglyphs that are kind of like written form of language. And then there are these xenoarchives, which are kind of like these visual tableaus, kind of like explaining what happened to them. So I was really excited to develop those.
On a technical level, how did you work with the level creation? Because every time you die, you reset, and then you go into the level, but it's different. And it almost seems to me like there's some sort of a rotation in the levels, because there is some familiarity to them. Is that how you created them?
So in Returnal, we utilize a lot of mixture of handcrafted content, you know, tech, art, all these things adding into what we call a sort of a hybrid procedural generation. So it means that the the rooms or the environments, the areas you come into will have familiar setups, and they will feel very cohesive and have an atmosphere that is haunting and feels very kind of cool to wander around and explore. But then the enemies, the items, the different challenges you encounter in those rooms are spawned uh, based, randomly, and also, of course, each area is connected to another area randomly. So once you start, you always start at the spaceship that's crashed, Helios. And then once you go through that first door, then the experience will be very different each time. And then when you get to the next biome, again, there will be familiar bits and pieces, but then everything will be mixed up in a way that is always fresh. So this really gives you an understanding of honing your skills, being a better player, understanding what are your mechanics you can use, what are the things you can unlock, and then really allows you to kind of uh, have one more go, but instead of being stuck at a certain enemy or a thing, you have again the whole roster of things ahead of you. So it's a different way of resetting and kind of starting a new game loop. And the wonderful thing about the story layers is that Celine's very much in tune with this. She's understanding that, hey, I'm waking up here again. She's there with the player. And that kind of messes with her head and the player's head as well, the further you kind of go into the rabbit hole.
Something that also sets this game apart is that there's no save option in the game. What are your thoughts behind that decision?
It's weird because this is something that will come up and is coming up, but I I don't think any of our games have had a traditional save option. So for us, it's kind of like, it actually may be something that players expect, but then again, once you look at it from the perspective of it's all about that run and that cycle. And the PS5 does have really good abilities to stay within your ongoing active memory there. So maybe players can look at it from that perspective of I'll leave my controller down, I'll do something for a little bit, and then I can come back. But yeah, so every time you restart, you will actually restart. So it plays into that a little bit, but we'll see how it ends up being received. But we're very conscious of this.
And not to again spoil anything, but there are a couple of things in the game that can allow you to kind of like save failing situation. So death is not final every time.
Yeah, there's definitely things that can help you stay alive, but in terms of actually turning off your console fully and then going away from it, we've left that a little bit more traditional sense.
The crash, the attack, my death. Trapped in this endless cycle. Even death is no escape.
Let's talk a bit about the main character, Celine. And Eevi, you were a big part in creating that character.
Yeah, very much. I think Celine, this is very much a character-driven story. Of course, there's the planet and the alien civilization, but it is very much her driving the whole thing. Like she's drawn to this planet, and kind of like the early part of the game is about figuring out like why is she here, like why is she specifically here, and what makes her so kind of like determined to kind of like see it through despite all these horrors and all these obstacles that kind of like the planet throws at her, and all the kind of like very deep psychological links that you kind of start to uncover as you kind of progress in the game without kind of spoiling too much. So it's very, very kind of like interesting world building challenge that you're kind of like, you're building the world and you're building the character and you're building these links between them. So they are kind of like, they are separate but connected.
Celine also reminds me of a different huge sci-fi character, which is Ripley from the Alien movies, which is also because of the voice actress portraying Celine. She has kind of the same feel as Sigourney Weaver did in those movies. Was that intentional?
Well, we definitely started with like, the character has always been Celine, like that hasn't changed throughout the development. And she was always meant to be kind of like, not necessarily like tough, but like the word that we used a lot was determined, almost to a fault. So even if she isn't kind of like, combat ready, like she has time on her side. Like she can go through these loops and kind of like take that analytical mindset and apply it to combat. Like that's how I think about when I like put myself in her shoes. But she's definitely like, yeah, I think Alien is a big influence there. And I've been really excited to showcase kind of like a game where the main protagonist is actually like an older woman. Someone who's not like, oh, why is this like fresh-faced person just suddenly like mowing down enemies like it's every day for her? And kind of like, it's been exciting to be able to kind of weave more history, because she's been through some stuff, maybe even before she got to the planet. So having someone who's older kind of like works to me on so many levels.
Yeah, everything has a role to play, and I think that's what really makes this a strong character-driven game, is that there's a clear idea of the types of life situations and exactly this personality and this determination that needs to be told. And because everything is interwoven into the three different factors that we have, it's the Celine, the planet, and then the aliens, that really add up to something that I think does start to make a bit more sense. But again, it's supposed to be a puzzle in your head as well, because as a player, the best type of I think storytelling that you can reach is that idea that you're contemplating even after you played the game.
And this game is a PS5 exclusive. Did you know from the beginning that it would be developed specifically for the PlayStation 5 system?
Yes, so we very early on, so when we were starting with this concept, very early on we had an idea. Of course, at that point, nobody knew exactly what this PS5 was or what it would be. So eventually we would get more details and specs, and of course, as a developer within that very few fold, we were early on brought into to work on specifically hardware specific features. So, we had an understanding of the SSD, how we could do fast loading. Eventually we got some hands-on with early controller prototypes. So very much part of that from the very early concept. And now we actually have incredible haptics, adaptive triggers. If you aim your weapon and you aim down sights with the L2 trigger, halfway it will actually have a little resistance, and if you click through that, you'll get your alt fire weapon. So we kind of put two weapons into one trigger in that sense. The 3D audio, we have such a wonderful team over at Sony as well, working on just livening up the world and the enemies and everything. So all these things are very specific to the PS5, and we've had great support for a long time already from Sony's side, to making sure that we hit all the right marks to showcase this platform.
And finally, what thoughts or advice would you give to the players who are about to sit down and enjoy Returnal?
I think for me, the biggest the thing that made the biggest difference was learning how to read the map, like seeing what is the main path forward and what is a side path, and kind of like knowing the difference between those. So only take the side path if you kind of like, if you're ready to take on a challenge or you need more powerful weapons, items. But kind of like main path is your straightest way forward, and kind of like learning to use the teleport system to kind of go back to earlier spots like the shop and that kind of stuff. That will help you hugely, I think.
Yeah, for me, it's the kind of game that you can easily pick up and play, and then you immediately know that it will be difficult to master. But take that with a grain of salt. Expect that sometimes you pick it up, you play for 15 minutes, but also expect that sometimes when you're a bit more relaxed and you can get into the zone, you can go on for a long time. And that's when this thing starts to click. And sometimes you can even take a breather and just take in the ambiance of the world. And maybe there's going to be hidden things that you just notice off to the side of your face. Maybe they're real, maybe they're not. That's the kind of things we want to make your mind work around when you're playing Returnal.